My name is Lorenz. For most of my life, I lived in the small Bavarian countryside near the forest of Grobern, Germany. I was a farmer, a simple man. My neighbors, who lived on the isolated farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck, were not simple people. The Grubers were a strange and insular family. The old man, Andreas, was a cruel and domineering patriarch. He lived with his wife, Cecilia, their widowed daughter, Victoria, and her two small children, Cecilia and Joseph. There were dark rumors about them in the village, whispers about the old man and his daughter, whispers that I tried to ignore. I had my own complicated history with Victoria. I had loved her once. I believed her young son, Joseph, was my own. But Hinterkaifeck was a place of secrets, a place you learned to keep your distance from. In late March of 1922, a few days before the horror began, Andreas Gruber stopped me on the path between our farms. He looked rattled, his usual arrogance replaced with a deep, primal fear. He told me the last maid had quit months before, claiming the house was haunted. He had laughed at her then, but now he wasn't so sure. He told me he'd found a single set of footprints in the fresh snow, leading out of the dense forest and directly to his farmhouse. There were no tracks leading back. It was as if someone had come from the woods and simply vanished into the house. He said that for nights afterward, they heard footsteps and voices coming from the attic, right above their bedrooms. He had searched, but found no one. A strange newspaper from Munich, one he had never seen before, appeared on his porch. One of his house keys had gone missing. He was a man who prided himself on being in control, but he told me, his voice trembling slightly, "I don't think we are alone." That was the last time I ever spoke to him. For the next few days, a strange silence fell over Hinterkaifeck. The mail carrier noticed the post was piling up, untouched. Little Cecilia, who was 7, missed her classes at school for 2 straight days. At first, no one thought much of it. The Grubers were known to be reclusive. But by the 4th day, a deep sense of unease settled over our small community. I decided to gather a few men from the village to go and check on them. On April 4th, we walked up the long, muddy path to the farm. The place was unnervingly still. No smoke came from the chimney despite the cold. The dog didn't bark. The cattle in the barn were lowing with hunger. We shouted their names. Only the wind answered. The house was locked up tight. We moved around to the large barn connected to the house. We found a way to pry the main door open. The moment the heavy door creaked open, the smell hit us. It was the smell of hay, animals, and something else. Something sweet and metallic. Something dead. We stepped into the gloom. The cattle were restless in their stalls. We walked deeper into the barn, toward the back where the hay was stored. And then we saw them. My friends recoiled, cursing and gagging, but I was frozen. There, lying in the hay, were 4 bodies. It was Andreas, his wife, his daughter Victoria, and the little girl, Cecilia. They were stacked on top of one another, partially covered with an old door and more hay. Their heads were... It's a sight a man can never unsee. They had all been killed with a mattock, a farmer's tool, a heavy pickaxe. Their faces were gone, reduced to a pulp of blood and bone. Our horror was not over. We forced our way into the main house. In her bedroom, we found the new maid, Maria Baumgartner. It had been her very first day on the job. She was dead in her bed, killed the same way. And in the bassinet in his mother's room, we found little Joseph, my Joseph. He too had been murdered. The entire family, 6 people, slaughtered in the dead of night. The police from Munich arrived, but the investigation was a nightmare from the start. They could find no motive. Robbery was ruled out. A large amount of cash was found untouched in the house. This was something else. This was personal, an act of savage, intimate rage. But the most chilling discovery was yet to come. As the investigators pieced together the timeline, a horrifying picture emerged. The evidence suggested the killer had not fled after the murders. He or they had stayed. For several days after slaughtering the entire family, the killer had remained on the farm. The cattle had been fed. The dog had been cared for until it was killed. Food had been eaten from the kitchen. The neighbors had even seen smoke rising from the chimney over the weekend, assuming the family was home. The monster had lived there among the dead bodies, sleeping in their beds, eating their food, stoking their fire, for days. The footsteps in the attic Andreas heard were real. The phantom had been living with them all along, waiting. The investigation was massive, but it led nowhere. Over 100 suspects were questioned, including myself. For a time, the whole village looked at me with suspicion. Could a jilted lover have done this? No. This was the work of a demon, not a man. The case grew cold, becoming a dark legend, a ghost story to frighten children. The farm itself was considered cursed. A year later, it was demolished, burned to the ground, as if to cleanse the earth of the evil that had happened there. But you cannot destroy a memory. I am an old man now. Everyone else from that time is gone. But I still see it. The sight of them in the barn. The tiny body of the boy I believed was my son. The mystery of Hinterkaifeck was never solved. The killer was never found. He was a phantom who walked out of the woods, lived silently among his victims, committed an act of unimaginable brutality, and then simply vanished back into the world. He could be anyone. He could be anywhere. That is a horror that does not fade with time. It only grows colder. The greatest horror isn't the evil you see coming. It's the evil that's already inside. The evil that sleeps in your attic, that listens to you breathe, that eats at your table in the dead of night, and waits patiently for the sun to go down.